Hello and welcome back to Femme TV. I'm your host, Farhana Kassem. Today, I am thrilled to be joined by renowned clinical psychologist, Dr. Gina Giulio. Gina, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you for having me.
For all of our audience who may not be as familiar with your work as we are here at Femme, could you give us a little bit of a background into you, Pathwell, and how you came to be our mental health expert of choice?
Thank you for that kind introduction. So Pathwell is an organization that I started within the past year in the pandemic. And, some people might say, well, you are just crazy for starting a business in the pandemic. But listen, when you're in the business of mental health, we've never been busier. So we've been helping people in the past year deal with mainly like anxiety, depression. So we see individuals at Pathwell, we see families, couples, children, really the full spectrum of the sort of developmental spectrum. But we also work really closely with organizations and do a lot of work within the corporate wellness space. I think a nice thing that I've seen in this pandemic is that companies have invested more in mental health. Which has been great to see, silver lining, because, a lot of people, like I said, have been struggling, right? And we've been dealing with issues like working from home that most of us really haven't had to deal with before. So it has been very busy, needless to say, at Pathwell.
Well, I'm glad to hear that we have resources like you out there. I know personally now, having worked from home for 12 months, it's definitely been an adjustment, and some days it takes a toll, but maintaining balance, I think, is something that a lot of us have been trying to figure out what that means in this new world order. How can you share with our audience a few of your tips? I mean, as a mom of a very young, active little boy, as a business owner, as a partner, as a friend, how do you maintain balance? How do you, as a professional, take on this challenge that so many of us are struggling with?
Yeah, listen, it's not easy, right? And certainly, I have my days where it is hard to balance everything. So I guess, the first thing I would say about that is this is not the time to strive for perfection, right? So, we've seen it. I don't know if you've seen this, but I've seen the people on Instagram, posting what workouts they're doing and all the sour bread that they're making, and if that's you, like, good on you. But we all know that, Instagram is the filtered life, right? And things aren't always as they seem. So this is not the time to strive for perfection. Listen, everyone's just trying to survive this, right? We're having to deal with, like I said, things we haven't had to deal with before, right? The working from home, especially, if you've got kids and now having to manage, the online education and everything that brought with it, dealing with maybe aging parents at the same time, right? So many of us are juggling, especially females, of course, right? We are juggling these multiple roles. So what I would say to the femme fan out there is just don't strive for perfection, right? Just, this is not the time to do it. Not now, not ever, but especially not now. Do the best you can, ladies. Your best is good enough. And if you really believe that and really are forgiving of yourself, on most days, you'll be okay, right? A little self-compassion and self-kindness goes a long way. You want to make sure that you're taking time for yourself, right? Ensuring that you, at this, might have to block off some time for that oh so important self-care, right? Because if you don't do that, this self-care time is not magically going to appear. It just won't. So ensure that you are blocking that time off and protecting it so fiercely, just like you do, for your kids, your friends, your partners, your parents, your neighbors, right? Sometimes women, like, we tend to put ourselves last and everybody else first, right? So carve out that time for yourself. You know what they say, you can't serve from an empty cup, right? You can't do all of these things that you're doing and take care of yourself, or take care of other people rather, to the degree that you want to, if you don't start with yourself. right? So that's really important. And again, just at the end of the day, be kind to yourselves. If you do nothing else, be kind to yourselves, especially during these times.
That is some amazing advice. And I think it's really hard. You're right. We are constantly trying to put everyone else's needs ahead of ourselves. It actually leads me to a really great question that came in from our Instagram audience. And as you are probably very well aware, we've had over 200,000 Canadian women lose their jobs or have to walk away from their careers because of the pandemic and the impact it's had on their families. And the choices that they've had to make have often been difficult ones. One of our audience members has asked this question. I'm going to read it right off the screen here. It says, I never planned to be a stay-at-home mom. How do I adjust? I think it's a great question, and it's facing so many women here in Canada.
Yeah, I think, I feel for that person who asked that question. So many of us, right, are having to adjust to roles that we haven't had to perform before, right? So I get that. So I kind of still would sort of stand by what I just said in terms of, be kind to yourself. Don't expect your new role now of being a stay-at-home mom to go perfectly. I don't even know what that means or how you define it, right? If you got kids and you're going to get them a little extra screen time in order just, for you to keep your sanity, do whatever you need to do. Right? Take care of you, moms. This is hard, but to that audience member, I would also say, ensure that in this new role, again, that you're also taking care of you and that you're not giving up the things that you enjoy doing in order now to really, be fully engaged in this new role that you have, right? You can't forget about yourself. And so often, I think women especially think that self-care is selfish, right? I'm sure you've heard that. I hear this all the time from my clients. Oh, I can't do that. I've got my kids. I got this. I can't. That's selfish. What, me? Go out with my friends on an evening, leave my kids at home? Yeah, leave your kids at home because that's going to enable you to be a better mom. If you're, a happy mom, right? Happy life. What do they say? Happy wife. I say, happy mom, happy life, right? Take care of you. So self-kindness, self-compassion, don't try and be perfect in this role, and definitely ensure that you are still taking care of you and tending to your needs.
Great advice. And you're right. As moms, if we are not happy and we are not in a good space, we are much more likely to start yelling at our kids, to start freaking out, to find things that are wrong around us. It is really important. That self-care piece seems to be a recurring theme on these episodes, and all of the strong, inspirational women that we speak to definitely make that a priority. I think all of us need to take a little time for ourselves. Another really great question that came out of our studio audience, since it's a virtual studio, that I know I've heard from colleagues, from friends. It is a recurring theme, and it is, my partner and I now both work from home.
I knew you were
How
going to
in
say
the
that.
world? How do
Because
I
I
keep
keep
my
hearing this
sanity?
as well.
It's a recurring theme. It's a recurring theme. So the audience wants to know, Gina, how do I keep my sanity? What do I do? I now have 24/7 with this person that I really only ever saw evenings and weekends,
Right?
and we're driving each other crazy. What do
Yeah.
we do?
What do you do? I know. And people had to adjust to that literally overnight, right? We were just going about our business. And then it seems like literally, boom, one day, right? Pandemic hit, everything changed, right? Most people they had to stay home or work from home. And many of us have been doing that since. So yeah, not easy, not easy. Okay, so first of all, I would say that's normal. If you're feeling that way, that's normal. I've had some clients say to me, oh my gosh, does this mean that, you know, am I going to get a divorce? Does this mean that, my partner and I were not meant for one another? I was like, no, it's normal, right? So to feel a bit irritable, stressed, have your partner, kids drive you crazy, completely normal. Listen, these are very abnormal situations that we're in, right? This is an abnormal situation. So know that, okay? However, I would say, you know, there are sort of some limits to that, right? If you are fighting every day with your partner, where it's causing, you know, you some real distress or upset, then I think you need to take a step back and actually like do something about that. Either, you know, and make sure that you're engaging in your own social supports if you can. Maybe seek your own therapy, seek couples counseling if you have to. But, you know, if it's irritability, you know, from time to time your partner drives you nuts, that's completely normal, right? So again, just ensuring that you are taking care of you during this time is so important. If you have the sort of physical space in your abodes to do so, it's great if you have your own separate space from your partner, right? To go to where like you have your own, if you're working from home, you have your own workspace, or if, you know, stay at home moms have a spot, a little sanctuary in your home that is yours, right? The untouchable space, and your partner has his or hers. That's not always possible for everybody, right? Depending on what their living situation is. But if you can, that's helpful as well. Take breaks throughout the day if you can, especially, you know, with the nicer weather that's, you know, being bestowed upon us. Go for walks, sort of take little breaks from the day as opposed to just being around each other, you know, all of the time. That's not healthy anytime anyway, but never mind when you sort of add this layer of stress that's been happening. Yeah, but I think the most important thing I want to relay about that is that feeling frustrated right now, you know, quibbling here and there with your partner, your families, it's normal. So just know that it doesn't mean anything other than you're human.
You touched on a really great point there, and that's that it's okay to ask for help, you know, to lean on your social resources or even to speak to a professional about some of the challenges that you're facing. I feel like there's still a lot of stigma around asking for help or saying that I'm not okay. Can you maybe touch on that a little bit? I know that you face it every day, and it takes a lot of strength and courage for someone to reach out to a mental health professional. I think this might be something that our audience would benefit from hearing from you about.
Yeah, I am always just amazed and feel so privileged to be in my position to do what I do, right? To see just how brave and courageous it is for people to stand up and say, you know what, I'm not doing okay and I need some help. That is so courageous, right? Because it's always easier not to do anything, right? Doing nothing is always easier than doing something. And that is, you know, especially true when it comes to mental health. Like you said, unfortunately, there still is some stigma attached to mental health and, you know, asking for help as well, sometimes as well. But it is an incredibly, incredibly courageous and difficult thing to do. So to me, you know, I'm always reminded of that when I see my clients step forward and ask for help. It's an incredible act of bravery, right? And it's not a sign of weakness. It's quite the opposite. It's a sign of strength. We are getting better in terms of reducing the stigma that's associated with mental health. We've come leaps and bounds. You know, we have now campaigns like Bell Let's Talk, right? That's a sort of national campaign in Canada that really addresses mental health. We have got some amazing other great organizations and charities that really shine a light on mental health. We've had a lot of celebrities, I'd say in the past, you know, 5 years or so, come forth with their own admissions of, you know, struggling with mental health. We've got some really big athletes who have stepped forward, entertainers, right? So we are talking more about mental health and being more open about it, which is fantastic. And, you know, the more we do that, the more, you know, you step up and say, talk to people, let them know you're not doing okay. What that also shows you, it's a couple of things. It shows you that, first of all, I say mental illness is the great equalizer because it affects everybody, or it can, right? So it does not discriminate, right? It doesn't matter who you are, what walks of life you're from, how old you are, where you came from, where you were born. Mental illness can equally touch everyone, right? And the statistics are pretty staggering. So 50% of us, think about this, 1 in 2, 50% of us will have struggled with a mental illness or a mental health related condition at some points in our lives. That's us, 1 in 2, right? Currently, right now, the incidence rates, 1 in 5 are currently struggling with a mental illness. So that's about 20% of people. And I'll tell you for sure that number is higher, right? So the 1 in 5, those are the ones that we know about because those are the people who actually report, right, that they're not doing well, that they're struggling with depression or anxiety. So all this to say, mental illness is incredibly common, right? It can affect anyone. And, when you do come forth and ask for help, you learn that lesson, right? You find out that, hey, you're not the only one who's feeling this way. And maybe there's, other people don't feel exactly the same way, but they felt similar or they can relate, right? But you don't know that if you internalize and keep everything to yourself, right? So speaking about how you're feeling, asking for help also helps to destigmatize how you're feeling if you have your own stigma associated with that. But again, it's also an incredible way of validating how you're feeling and normalizing it in the sense that it is much more common than you think, right? And you might think that maybe you're the only one that feels this way, or you might feel incredibly alone, right? In terms of how you're feeling, but it is incredibly common, but you don't know that, and therefore don't get the social support that you need that can be so helpful to healing if you don't step up and talk about how you're feeling and ask for help.
That's great advice. Great advice. You're a trusted professional who spends all your day listening to challenges that other people may be facing. Can you share with our audience how you deal with your stresses, your feelings? What do you do when you're not feeling okay?
Yeah, great question. Great question. Listen, like I said at the beginning, I am certainly not perfect in terms of my own self care. Sometimes people think I've had this said to me too. People say, "Oh, you're a psychologist. You don't feel anxious. You don't get depressed. You don't get stressed." I'm like, "Oh, yeah, yeah, and yeah, all of the above." You know, because I'm not a robot. I'm human. I think maybe the advantage of being in the position that I am in is I can maybe recognize, right, the signs of, ooh, maybe I'm not doing well, or maybe I need to ask for some help, or set some boundaries, or what have you. I can recognize that maybe a bit sooner, and maybe I have the knowledge in terms of what could be helpful, right, in terms of interventions or things to do. But listen, I feel, and think just like everybody else does, right? So yeah, I've had to place an even greater importance on self-care during this past year, like I said at the beginning, because I have been so busy, right? And it can sometimes be difficult for sure, and I work like 3-4 days a week, seeing clients, 7 to 8, sometimes 9 clients all day. For sure, that can take its toll. So I have to ensure that my non-work life is as balanced and as full as possible, right? So what does that mean for me? And again, that's subjective, right? But what that means for me is, yeah, trying to carve out some time for exercise, trying to carve out some time and ensure that I spend some time with my son, making time for friends and making that a priority, ensuring that I'm still engaging with them and maintaining my social supports, right? And I say maintaining because that requires work, right? Especially when things are so busy, right? And continuing to invest in those relationships that are important to me, right? And that feed my soul. I have to make sure that all of that, right, is as functional and as operational as can be.
I think that our audience will really benefit from hearing from you on how you balance. You know, we all very much think that you must have it all together. You know how to handle this. And I think there's another stigma that a mental health professional, and you touched on this beautifully, would never have any problems, would be able to manage everything. But you're human. And for us to remember that we're all in it together, mental health professional or otherwise, it's okay. It's okay to not be okay. And it's okay to need help sometimes, whether that's from your friends, your family, or someone else. It's okay. So thank you so much for sharing that, for being open and vulnerable and human. I think that is really impactful, really impactful. I have one more question that's come in from our audience, and I think this one's probably going to resonate with our audience really well too. Now, this isn't about partners and the stress of being around them all the time.
There's a theme
It's a
here.
little different. This one's a little different. This one's a little different. It's how do I handle the constant fear that I have about everything since COVID?
Yeah, sort of anxiety, right? Because that's what this audience member is
Yes.
fear, right? The anxiety that's been sort of exacerbated during this pandemic has been to a degree that professionally I've never seen before. Why that is, kind of it makes sense. So this pandemic, especially at the beginning, right, where we didn't know what this thing was, right? What is this virus? How long is it going to last? How is it transmissible, right? Like everything was just a big unknown, right? Especially at the beginning. It's a bit, we know a little bit more now about the virus, but now sort of that anxiety has morphed into something else. But especially at the beginning though, because we've had to deal with and are still dealing with uncertainty, that can trigger anxiety in a lot of people, right? Because humans, we don't like uncertainty. Some of us can tolerate it better than others, right? There are degrees of how well or how easily we tolerate uncertainty, but it's inherent to our survival to know that things in our environment are certain and are predictable, right? It actually helps us to survive and to adapt to our environment. So when all of that is just thrown into disarray, literally overnight, is what happened with this pandemic, of course, that would cause a sense of unpredictability and therefore feeling a bit destabilized, right? So completely normal, right? Anxiety is the emotion that people have been feeling the most during this pandemic. So that study by StatsCan really showed that. So you ask people, what are the top 3 emotions that you've been feeling during this pandemic? The responses were number 1, anxiety. Number 2, fear, which is anxiety. And number 3, irritability. Okay, so there you go. So
I think we've touched on all of those with our audience questions. I think that, what we're hearing from our Femme audience resonates exactly with what Stats Canada is telling us.
Yeah. So, to experience fear, that sense of uncertainty in this pandemic, it's completely normal. Completely normal. Now, there are things that you can maybe think about doing to reduce that sense of uncertainty. So one thing I often ask my clients to do, okay, if they're really worrying about something or worrying about several things, first question I ask them is, okay, well, is this thing that you're worrying about within your control? Because so often, right, we try and control things that are actually not within our control. And trying to control those things will just continue to exacerbate and perpetuate our anxiety because there's nothing that you can do about it, right? And therefore, the worry or the concern continues, right? So ask yourself, that's the magic question, is what you're worrying about within the realm of your control. If it is not, you've got to let that thing go, right? Because there's literally nothing that you can do about it. And trying to control that thing, it's just going to make you feel worse. If what you're worrying about is within the realm of your control, even if it's just partially so, then ask yourself what you can do about it, right? Take some action against the thing that you're worrying about, because action is the antidote of anxiety, right? So if you do something, right, it has an opposite effect to anxiety. As action goes up, anxiety goes down, right? So think about whether or not there's anything you can do. So for example, if you're really worried about, finances, right? It's something that Canadians have been worrying a lot about. So distill your worry to what exactly is it about your finances that you're worrying the most, and maybe you seek the advice of a financial planner if you can, right, to maybe do something about your future finances if that's what you're worried about, right? So distill your worry to what in therapy we call like the hot thought. So in other words, what thought or worry are you most worried about, right? Or what thought is connected to the most emotion, and action that thing if you can. But if not, let that go, right? Because that's again going to just fuel that sense of anxiety and uncertainty that comes with it.
Really great advice. I love how you balanced or you shared that offset between action and anxiety, that increased action can truly reduce anxiety. And I'll tell you, I've never seen it or had it explained to me that way, but as you were speaking, I realized how much truth there is to that. When I'm feeling anxious about something, until I try to take control of how I'm going to resolve that or make myself feel less anxious about it by doing something, it doesn't actually get solved until I take action. So it's really great to hear you say that. And it resonated really well with me. I'm sure it did with a lot of other people too.
Nike figured this out a long time ago, right? Just do it.
Definitely.
I modify that for my clients. I say, just do something, right? Just do something, or just do a little something, right? It's the antidote of anxiety. It really is.
I think a lot of people are going to feel a lot more comfortable about saying, I'm not okay and I need some help. If you were to point our audience to certain resources, including your own, what would you suggest would be great starting points for people if they needed to reach out and ask for help?
Yeah, happy, to help those who we service clients who live in Ontario. Your audience can feel free to check us out. Our website is pathwell.ca, Instagram, Pathwell Clinic. We put out several posts a week with a lot of sort of free information on mental health. We have a posting actually on our Instagram for sort of 1-800 numbers and some other free resources that people can access. So my answer to your question would also depend on where your audience is located. So for example, we're located in Toronto, Ontario. There are some resources that are specific to residents of Ontario only. Our province has recently, thankfully, invested a lot of money into some free mental health resources that people can access. For example, there's a there's two actually online CBT, which is cognitive behavior therapy programs that anyone in Ontario can access for free. Mind Beacon and Ability CBT are two. There are resources for youth. There's a great one. First of all, there's a great organization called jack.org, Jack like the man's name, but also a wonderful platform called Big White Wall, which is essentially a online support program that people can access where they can talk to other people, right, about how they're feeling, right? Because what we were saying earlier, just how important social support is, right, to access when you're not feeling okay. Not everybody is lucky though, right, to have a robust social support network. So, for those folks, something like Big White Wall might be a great help to them. There are several resources for kids. Kids Help Phone is the one that immediately comes to mind. A wonderful resources for youth to access if they need somebody to talk to and feel that they can't, right? Or are the conditions maybe in their home don't facilitate, right, that sharing easily, or perhaps the home is the source of their stress. So that's a great organization. And I'm, happy to send a few more your way that your audience can access. They're out there, thankfully, more and more. So resources are becoming available that people can access for, mental health, either support itself or even just education, right? Because even that can be just so helpful, just to educate ourselves, right, on mental health, what it is, importantly also, what it isn't, right, in terms of sort of destigmatizing or demystifying it, or accessing educational resources can be really important. CAMH comes to mind. So CAMH is the Center for Addiction and Mental Health. Their website is fantastic, has all kinds of educational information, resources on various mental health topics. So yeah, thankfully, a lot of resources are out there at your disposition. And again, I'm happy to share more of those with your audience as well.
This is fantastic, Gina. Thank you so much for taking time out of your very, very busy schedule to talk to all of us today. For anyone who wants some more information on Pathwell Clinic, please visit the Femme site. We will have a lot more links to share with you and access to Dr. Gina. Gina, thank you for taking the time today.
My pleasure, really.
Join us for our next episode, where we'll be speaking with Enza Taberi-Chichia, a mental health advocate, motivational speaker, and author. Until next time, take good care.